so much of the war on marijuana is really a war on the 60s. You know, it's a way of enforcing conformity on people. The pot laws have very little to do with this plant and everything to do with the people who smoked it. And in the 60s, marijuana was a symbol of rebellion, openly and defiantly a symbol of rebellion.
Hey, that's the way to do it.
Everybody was smoking pot. Your school teacher was smoking pot. You know, it's like it was a sacrament. So Tommy and Cheech and Chong were the voice of all those people, that emerging cultural front, that liked the effects of marijuana better than they liked the effects of nicotine, caffeine, and alcohol. It was a cultural divide.
We had a huge spiritual awakening in the 60s, and they've spent the last 40 years trying to put the genie back in the bottle, and they've been very successful at it.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new, all-out offensive.
I think we're on to something really big, Harry. This could be the bust we've been waiting for.
I told Peter Fonda this when we talked to him. We were actually going over this issue, and I said, they're out to get us. All of us. It's just starting with Tommy, because you got that right. I said, so we got to stick together. And I said, and if they have their way, they will get all of us eventually.
The catchphrase of the 70s, do your own thing, has been replaced in the 80s by just say no.
I went to Oberlin in the 60s and graduated in 69 from Oberlin, so I am well aware of the whole culture. Tommy Chong is a lot of things, but he's made his cause célèbre drugs. And you got to live your life way beyond that. We're past the 60s.
What's really remarkable that under this drug czar, John Walters, John Ashcroft, the Attorney General of the Bush administration, they've really adopted a new focus of the drug war. And the new focus is marijuana. Marijuana is the culture war for them. It's the way of taking the drug war to middle America.
There has been a culture in the United States in which entertainers have portrayed drug use as something that's acceptable and in fact desirable. And unfortunately, our youth are influenced by those types of statements.
Potheads are so easy, you know. I've known potheads to ask cops directions with a joint in their mouth. Excuse me, officer, can you tell me... Never mind.
It's not as if the Justice Department sent out a notice to all of these people producing drug paraphernalia, producing bongs and such, and said, we realize that this law has not been enforced by the federal government in recent years, but now we're going to start to enforce it, so cease and desist from your manufacturer. They didn't do that. There was no heads up. There was no notice. Right? What they do is they raided people, they arrested people middle of the night, humiliated them, seized their property, destroyed their property. This was all about politics. It was all about humiliation. That's what was going on. This was not about protecting the kids. This was not about any of that.
Yesterday was September 11th, the day we were supposed to remember what was really important to us in America. And on that day, yesterday, Tommy Chong was sentenced to 9 months in federal prison for selling bongs on the internet. Finally, the terror alert can go back to green.
Right after 9/11, Ashcroft said, we have to concentrate on a few things that we need to do most importantly. He made a very, very smart statement that he never lived up to, which was, look, now that we're confronted with this terrorist problem, you know, we can't really do what we always did. And I interpreted that to mean, you know, we can't fight the culture wars, we can't fight the drug wars, we can't fight the war on sex. We got to fight the terrorists. We can't divert our manpower. Well, obviously, that went out the window, because I can't think of a more ridiculous diversion of manpower than to bust Tommy Chong. If anyone feels safer because Tommy was put in jail, that's a ridiculous human being.
They're just tearing this whole Constitution apart. They're tearing freedoms apart. You know, they got this. And then the 9/11 hit, and then that gave them the carte blanche. You know, now they can do a Patriot Act on everybody.
We've got a new war, and I want you to know your government is doing everything we can to defeat those who hate freedom. It's so important for Americans to know that the traffic in drugs finances the work of terror, sustaining terrorists.
And I mean, even right now, I read where they equated drug use with terrorism. So that's the first step in saying that if you use drugs, you can be locked up as a terrorist because you support a terrorist organization, your use of drugs.
The terrorists use drug profits to fund their cells, to commit acts of murder. If you quit drugs, you join the fight against terror in America.
Time has arrived. I got a little thing I used to do, still do. When I was when I went back doing comedy, and so I hadn't been on stage for almost 10 years when I went back to do comedy again, and I had no act, and so I did this little time thing where I said, I'm going to remember this moment when I had no act, and I'm going to remember this moment 10 years from now when I've been on the road for 10 years and I, you know, got tons of material. Because it was sort of like a helpless feeling, you know, that you're caught in this time warp. And so that's kind of how I'm handling this little trip I'm going on. Because I'm going to remember, I'm not going to remember, you know, it's not so much dwelling on the fact that I'm leaving. I'm looking forward to the time when I'm coming back. That's the time I'm going to be remembering. It's funny, Arnold we're going to see if we're going to have a governor named Arnold. I got a feeling we're not. I mean, if they elect Arnold, I mean, then we really are a nation of retards. I talked to the prison, Taft prison, finding out what I can bring and everything.
What happened to your glasses?
And they said, oh, they're old. I think I got a kind of a...
I'm going to throw these out.
So what else?
Your glasses.
What?
These ones.
Why?
What's embarrassing? You don't need
I can use them.
No, we'll throw it out.
Honey, don't do that. Don't throw them in.
You only get to take one pair to prison, honey.
The guy of the prison, I said, you know, what can I bring in the prison? He gave me a list. I can get a gray sweatpants, gray sweatshirt with no hoods, white t-shirt, gray underwear, white underwear, wedding band. He says, and you can bring prescription drugs provided you have a prescription from the doctor. So I said, well, I got a prescription for marijuana, and I bring that. And he goes, no. They're pretty nice. It's going to be a nice adventure. I'm going on location.